everybody. It's Wednesday, and that means it's time for our MUS 654 weekly hangout. And we have Pete with us, our resident student guitarist, waving in the corner. There we go. He's muted his mic because he's forgotten his headphones. And there he is. And I'm Laura Ritchie. I lead the course, and we're going to be joined by Ralph from Switzerland. I'm not going to try to mispronounce his surname. But this week we've been talking about studies and connecting material. The previous few weeks we've been talking about a number of different musical components and ways of learning and things that go into musical learning, from physical things to sound to instruments to scales. And this week we started talking about studies. And again, it's kind of like eating raw vegetables, but not necessarily. And so one of the interesting things, as always, is across instruments. What do we consider study material, and how have we been introduced to that? So I know, Pete, do you want to tell us something about you and study material?
Yeah, sure. Well, I'm a guitarist, so a lot of the study material I come from a sort of a rocky sort of blues background. So I learned a lot of the stuff I learned was either from YouTube or by ear. So I didn't really read out of books and stuff like that. The study material I have was more like things like scales and reading like different chord sheets and stuff like that. That's what I would kind of use to sort of broaden my sort of knowledge on the guitar, I guess. The other things that I would do was, it's not really a material as such, but jamming was a good one to study, because I found that I learned a lot off other people. So like I try and emulate not only the greats, you know, like B.B. King or Hendrix or anything like that. Hello, Ralph.
Hello.
Yeah, I just try and emulate everyone basically. So I kind of don't think of a study as in a one particular thing, like I'm now learning this scale and this is the study material and everything else is playing. I think of it as kind of, you're always kind of studying a little bit, I guess. But I'm not sure.
Yeah. Hey, Ralph, can you introduce yourself? Fantastic, you could join us.
Yeah, it took a while. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Good. So I'm Ralph. I studied in Salzburg at the Mozarteum first, music, and so church music and organ and choir directing, with lots of improvisation and composition as well. And then I specialized in Basel at the Schola Cantorum Basiliensis in early music, so harpsichord, all kinds of historical keyboard instruments and historical research and yeah, everything around it. And at the moment I'm partly freelanced and also organist, and also teach in Aberdeen at the university, basso continuo and harpsichord and things like that.
So how can I jump right in and ask, how did you come to study material and etudes all the way? This is like a huge question, all the way from when you were a student and possibly a very young learner. So that's the first question. How did you come to study material as a young learner?
Well, first of all, I had always teachers that asked me questions from the beginning. Also, as a student, at school, as a child, I had always teachers that asked me questions and how to find out things. And so I always enjoyed going to libraries very early on and things. So and follow the questions up, because I wanted to know. And then if you are in a library, then for me it was always very old-fashioned. It was always I followed up a question, and then I got interested in different books and different music and different materials. So I ended up returning from the library with lots of other stuff, but not the stuff I actually wanted.
Oh yes.
And so it's always so yeah, it's a step by step. Then I actually learned how to do research and finding out new things.
So what about the? Because when you talk about studies, Pete plays the guitar. I played
Yeah.
the cello,
Yeah.
and as a cellist, there are many published books and compositions that would be study material given, you know, etudes, and there's a high school of cello playing and books, which it doesn't so much exist for the popular guitar in the same way. So you've said you went to the library and researched things.
Yeah.
Did you come to a point where you created your own study material ever? Or did you make a balance between the published music and what you needed to learn?
Well, it depends, because in my area in early music, of course, you don't have um, just books. Of course, you have secondary material and things, but you don't have actually books you can use and believe what's written in it. So in the end, yes. For example, for my teaching, I started to create my own material based on historical material. So I read instructions and also habits from the area I'm interested in, and from there I create a systematical my own systematical material in order to teach my subject based on historical material. For example, that is a very interesting area to follow up. But also, if you say like modern guitar or things, I do lots of improvisation because it's part of my historical area. And for example, reading descriptions about historical improvisation, what people did in earlier times, like they went to the hairdresser and there was always a lute hanging on the wall at the wall, and everyone just played and improvised. And you have descriptions how things were, so you can just go from there and study them and develop your own material again.
Do you find that your students are that they take to this well, or do you find that there's an aversion to the idea of improvising as a modern performer?
Well, as a modern performer, it depends which area you go in, which style you go in. But also, last year I worked with jazz musicians. We did a kind of a jazz version of Purcell's Dido and Aeneas, and it was very interesting for me, and I learned a lot. Both sides learned a lot from the jazz. Learned a lot from the historical point of view. I learned a lot from the jazz point of view. And there are lots of traditions, unspoken traditions in the jazz side, for example, and it's also interesting where we personally are stuck in, because if we follow our traditions, one teacher teaches a style, another teacher teaches another style, and we just do that without being very open-minded, then we just stuck there. And it's also like the same in classical music. If a singer has, for example, follows a tradition of ornamentation, and it's passed on from teacher to student and student and student, you're just stuck, and you forget what actually was behind, or originally behind, and all the other possibilities. So I think we should just take that on, and then what we get, what we are surrounded with, and then just go out of our boxes.
So I think that's a fantastic message to take away, of being historically informed about where things came from and doing some research, not just taking things at face value, what one person may do or say as a habit. But I'm curious about making a systematic approach to learn something, and then do you then apply it? So if you take something that is not a simple topic, but is something that most people have heard of, a bass line, a basso continuo, or figured bass, how might you approach learning that, and then how might you apply it in your professional practice?
Well, I think it's again a topic we have to view from different aspects, because I think a topic like basso continuo is also very prejudiced, and we can actually use it in lots of areas, also in jazz or in analysis up till Mahler symphonies or things, because you can just reduce a whole score very quickly if you are able to do basso continuo and these things. And where I approach it this way, that we have to practice a few skills, basic skills, like playing cadences or just sequences of figures, and so that we don't just read numbers. That's not possible, even you do it too quickly. So it wasn't the original way. It's a short way of writing music down. And because everyone was lazy, all the composers were lazy, and in a practical way, and they just wanted to notate as little as possible. So we have to retranslate everything what they wanted, and so we have to learn a few skills, how to read and recognize combinations of numbers, and we have to learn about the composer and the style. We have to learn about the country, what the people ate, what they read, what they smelled, to understand how the sound world was or should be, and then from practicing these skills and taking on all the knowledge we have built up behind it as well. So we create a kind of sound world of accompaniment, or a sound world even of improvising along a figured bass line, or a partimento, which is a short notation of a whole piece. And then we approach it in different ways that opens different worlds, I have to say.
Yeah. So what about? I mean, I think it's very interesting that you said that the composers were a little bit lazy and they didn't want to write things down. I think that students and performers can be a little bit lazy, and sometimes if you have something that is a study for a particular technique, sometimes it can be, we can think a little bit wrongly, but we can think that it'll fix it, and it's more than that, isn't it?
It's much more, because and it's very interesting. It's very exhausting in one respect. What I say now, because sometimes we take on simple exercises and practice them probably in the wrong way, because no one is checking it and things, and we don't think what it actually does. And I think it's not the right way. We have to always question an exercise. We have always follow it up, and in a way that we ask ourselves, what does it actually do the job for us right now? Do we do it in the right way? And then we save time, in fact, in the end.
Do you think you can learn only from repertoire?
Well, I think it's interesting in the basso continuo and continuo tradition. There are lots of sources. They say, for example, we practiced 8 hours a day basso continuo and counterpoint and things like this with their teachers. But they never, for example, so in the 17th, 18th century, they never practiced technique like in the 19th century, all the exercises and etudes for the virtuosic repertoire. But they got the technique as well, and maybe with more understanding of the music itself. And this is what I actually admire in this period, because you learn your technique via of course practicing a few things and to realize them. And they are also very precise with how a trailer and ornament should sound, how something should, you have to practice that. It's quite clear, but it's not like a friend of mine, a modern pianist, that just did his exercises for hours and hours And at the same time, he learned Italian because he could read this book. It was just an automatical thing. He said, I'm so bored with doing the exercises. I read a book at the same time. So I think that would be not the right way. You have to understand and learn how to understand what's behind the music, and it doesn't matter what style it actually is. And then it's going to be quicker.
That old way makes me think of a comparison. I want to bring Pete in here and ask something, because in cello learning, if I was going to learn from the repertoire, I couldn't necessarily simplify it down and do it progressively. But if I was practicing, if somebody's practicing their basso continuo for hours and hours and hours, it would be possible for a soloist to play with them, perhaps, and not with them for some of the time. And I was thinking, actually, in guitar learning, people talk about learning the voicing and learning one of the lines, and having perhaps the teacher play some of it and the student play some of it, and it might be the same piece, but it's broken down into stages. Whereas if I was learning a concerto, I wouldn't play part of the notes, and the teacher play the other part of the notes. So, Pete, have you ever had that? Does that resonate?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, in terms of like learning something on the guitar, I've broken it down into like actual sections where you'll play like just a group of like say 3 notes, and then the next 3 notes, and then the next 3 notes, and then play between the first 6 notes to learn how to 2 together, if you know what I mean. So even in that sense, I've done it. But then, as I earlier about the jamming thing, I've had times where basically we'll do like a 12-bar blues, say for example, and my teacher will take the rhythm, and then I'll do some soloing, and then we'll swap, and then he'll do some soloing, and then I take the rhythm. So that's definitely something that happens, in my experience at least. It happens a lot more within the guitar sort of world, and it's much more just sort of not like natural, but you know what I mean, like people are a lot more inclined to sort of learn in that way, from sort of bouncing off each other rather than like you sort of read from a sheet. That's, to me, that's a lot more kind of the classical world.
But there's no reason that a classically trained player couldn't learn and adopt some of that in their playing and performance and learning. So that's why I'm so interested in Ralph saying, with the research and understanding the context. Actually, I don't know why we couldn't do this. So Ralph, do you have any experience translating this into a more classically minded performer, for someone like that?
Yes. Well, I actually don't make the difference anymore between classical and because we actually do precisely the same thing as Peter described. For example, we have a bass line, or we give each other a bass line, and there are lots of pieces, operas, whatever, where they didn't even write an overture or whatever. They say improvise, and you give each other a bass line, and you have a continual group, like you have a harpsichord and a theobo, a guitar, a bass instrument, and a harp and whatever. And then we do exactly this jamming. So you give an impulse. You know the bass line. You know the system, and then you swap around who is on top and who accompanies, who does the solo bits, and all of that. So we do actually the same thing, and this is a very practical and a nice aspect to the music, for example. And but for example, if you because you mentioned it before, Peter, as well, if we need to build up our own repertoire of technique as well, because then we can do all this stuff, and we can make music with all the other people and things, and this we have to do in a very personal way, because this putting things together, it's also, for example, how I would practice a classical piece. So I always start in the back with the ending of a piece, and build it and split it into sections, and then I put them together. And it's nice for me, it's nice to play into something I already can do. So that's why I start in the back and work myself to the beginning. So I think these are, yeah, two different interesting aspects.
I really like that. And with if people were thinking, what I like a lot is that you don't categorize anymore the classical or the Baroque or the modern, or give people labels like that. But if people were going to think about improvising musicians, they might think it's a very refined skill. But actually, if you were doing that sort of with different people playing the different parts, that it's a finished performance. But what you're describing is that it's also a practicing tool, a learning tool that you do together. Did I get that right?
Yeah, you have to. I think it's important that you build up your level of musical understanding and also your skills, and then you can do all the stuff in a very free way. So, for example, we have in the 16th century, one of my philosophers I really like the most. It was Castiglione. He wrote a book about behavior at court and things, and he invented one word. It's sprezzatura, and this fascinates me because sprezzatura means basically easygoing, that you can do everything in a very non-stressful way. So in order to that, you have to. So in music or performance, you have to know your repertoire. You have to know your music. You have to be so free with everything that you actually can start playing with it in a very free way, and that of course notice the audience, the players you play with, the other musicians, and then it becomes really enjoyable to watch, to listen to, and you have a good time on stage as well.
When you get to that point as well, you can work effectively across different instruments. Hopefully it no longer becomes a barrier that actually the harp player has a whole different technique than the keyboard player, than the singer, but you all can musically work together.
Exactly, yeah.
That's really good. But as a learner, this sort of idea of reaching that point, it takes time, doesn't it? So if somebody is thinking, actually, I've never done that, I've never considered working in a way with other people where we might swap parts and take on different roles, do you have any advice for somebody who would be just starting to embrace this kind of thinking and learning technically and musically?
Well, it takes a lifetime, and you never reach actually an end point, which is also a nice thing, because it keeps you going. No, I think for me it was a very long process, and I think you have to try lots of things. You have to try lots of methods. You have to take on advice, of course, of people you trust. You have to have teachers you trust, or if you don't trust them, then question them in the right way. It's both ways a good thing. And then I think it's a very individual process to find out your personal right way of learning and practicing. It doesn't matter which instrument, and then you gradually build up your skills, and you become freer and freer, and then you reach this point of sprezzatura, of course, in any stage as well, because well, you don't have to play the most complicated piece at first, and not the most complicated ensemble piece, and so it gradually builds up, and then probably you come to a point where it's not about your skills. It's about your technique. It's about your personality. You see then one gets more nervous than another one on stage. One likes to talk on stage. One is more introverted. So you have to use actually your skills, and you have to be aware of your skills, and also of your weak points, and then you can work on the weak points privately, and you can just be a star with your strengths on stage, and because you're aware of them, and it's always this balance.
That sounds really good. Pete, do you have anything you want to ask to Ralph?
I just think that your outlook on learning seems to be one of the healthiest I've experienced in quite a while. Even what cracked me up was learn the last bit of the piece first, so then you can play into something you already know. I think that's amazing. I'm definitely going to have to try that. I think as musicians, it's interesting because we're always trying to go to the next step. We're always trying to build, and it's like, I think that's an interesting one because you almost are bringing the next step to you in a way, and I quite like that idea. I think it's really quite nice, and you sort of get an early reward for learning something. So that was I think that was really nice. But yeah. I don't really have anything to add. I just wanted to say that was really cool, and I'm definitely going to try it.
Thanks.
Are there any cornerstone pieces that if you have had a holiday or a break or an intense work period, you have to come back to something that you think, I always come back to this piece to refresh my either technique or musicality?
Yeah, there are lots of different pieces in different ways. For example, there are pieces I can't play technically very well, and so I started them actually quite early, and I returned to them to improve them, and I wouldn't play them in public yet. And there are pieces just very personal pieces that are quite, yeah, they have either a story behind, or they are so deep and like for example a few pieces by Bach I really like, and I played them lots of times already in public, and I have to return to them because I change and they change with me. So I see them in different ways, and they talk back in different ways, and so it's nice that you can return to a piece and it's not done. It's never done. It proves also it's a good composition. Yeah.
I muted myself and I forgot about it. Sorry. I said that's brilliant. It's one of those things accidentally. If I type something, the microphone picks it up, and I thought I'd mute it. No, that's really, really good. There are yes. Let's see, a last question. I'm thinking of my last question for your students. Yeah. Sometimes when you have a student and they're on this learning journey, it can be tricky to see progress, especially if, as Pete said, we're always trying to get to the next level and do the next hard or something, and actually sometimes the sort of progress that is progress isn't about more notes or faster notes or higher notes or louder notes. How do you encourage your students to know that they have made progress?
Sometimes it's really difficult because you as a teacher sometimes you see progress, and the student can't see it because it's not a huge thing. It just for example sounds amazing and differently because of I don't know what. You can, yeah. So then what I usually do, I of course tell, and we talk about and we about it, and we probably I ask for the next step and see how it develops then, and then I can see if it yeah, which kind of progress it actually was. Was it a personal progress? Was it a technical progress? Was it both? Was it a good day? Sometimes we just have good day and bad days, or just an anecdote from my study times of studying. When I studied in Basel, I had an organ teacher. It was always very nice. We had a very nice organ there, a historical Silbermann in an old church, so quite special, nice instrument. And once I was really well prepared. I went to my lesson and thought, this time I'm really well prepared. I can play this and so on. But just before my lesson, I had a kind of argument, a strong argument with my girlfriend in the car. I went to the lesson. I started playing my piece. Didn't make any mistakes. I thought, great, that worked well. And my organ teacher said, all right, what's wrong today? I don't think it makes any sense. Let's go and have a coffee. So he could actually completely read through me and see, there's something which blocks me today, and it's not free. It's not the right way of taking on things. So my brain is somewhere else, and then he said, yeah, let's go and talk about things, and we go for a coffee just. And this is a sign of a good teacher for me, and I really try to read my students in this way as well, which is really difficult, but I try to.
I think that's a brilliant story, and yeah. But the learning is never straightforward, and it's never just one thing. And I think that's a great. It's many things out of that story, but just the notes doesn't do it, and that goes all the way back to your advice about the studies and understanding that actually you said it's what they smelled, what they lived, what they did, how the lute hanging on the wall in the hairdresser, and it shapes everything. So it's more of a holistic approach. It's gone. 6:32 over here. It's an hour later for Ralph. The sun's going down. But I think I should wrap it up and say thank you very much. Can you tell us your whole name? Because I didn't want to mispronounce it in the beginning.
My name is Ralph Stelzenmüller. And, yeah.
Yeah, so thank you very much for taking the time to join us. And Pete, too. And to everyone out there, if you have any questions, you can always email me or tweet us with the hashtag MUS654. And I'll do our best to answer you. So see you next week, and until then, thanks. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.